The last few months have been some of the wildest the market has to offer, and nowhere do traders go more bonkers than the gambling den we call Wall Street Bets. With no ado whatsoever, let's toss this salad. Boys and girls, it is my honor to present the hottest trades of wet season. Our first contender is a serial masturbator from the San Francisco Bay Area by the name of Solid Sock 1794, who earns his living flipping and managing real estate. He appears jaded about many of San Francisco's policies, such as when his car was towed at a cost of about $720 7 minutes after parking, despite paying the meter. Nevertheless, the real estate market in the Bay Area is hot. Since the average house in San Francisco costs about $1.5 million, the sock man was no stranger to big numbers and leverage. But Sock Bro's mother was on the verge of retiring with about $2.1 million in her IRA. That sounds like a shitload. You can buy an entire neighborhood for that much money in Croatia. But San Francisco is another beast. Life is extremely expensive with no indication of abating. According to recent research, to live an average life in San Francisco, one needs about $2.3 million in savings to retire for 20 years. The sock mother being just shy of that figure means her retirement would be average at best. Mama Sock deserves better. A life of just getting by in Frisco is simply no way to spend the back nine in life, and moving to cheaper pastures wasn't on the menu. Solid Sock needed to step in. If his mother was going to enjoy her golden years in luxury, she'd need her son to take the reins. But make no mistake, should her child come up short, Sock Mama would see her portfolio sliced to ribbons, forcing her to move out of the city, or worse, become a financial burden to her son. For both Socks, this was an extremely high-risk situation. Failure was not an option. After consulting Sock Mama on the situation, the young man seized operational control of his mother's IRA. As there was no capital gains tax, Solid Sock quickly closed out all the bitch-ass conservative lifecycle funds ruminating in the portfolio. It was time to go ham. On May 7th, 2025, the market was making a solid recovery off the Liberation Day meltdown in April. But Alphabet Class A, ticker GOOGL, was struggling to keep up. It was priced at $151 per share, underperforming the market severely, likely due to bearishness that AI was going to crush Google search. Solid Sock found this petulance absurd. Alphabet is much more than Google search, and more so, there is no way Alphabet would throw in the towel and bow down to ChatGPT. Especially with its own AI tool called Gemini, Alphabet was already postured to tap back into the AI boom. Being down 20% year to date made no sense. It was time to shoot his mother's shot. Betting that Apple would get its act together in the next 3 months specifically, the Sockmaster full-ported $2 million into Google calls at the 155 and 150 strike prices with expiration in mid-August. His plan was simple. These at-the-money calls would be sensitive to price movements. Thus, when Google shows up to dunk on the bears, the call prices will rise rapidly, leading to gains right out of the gate. Commenters mocked him with images of Down syndrome and McDonald's. This move was reckless, especially since it wasn't even his own money. Redditors even offered to take care of Sock Mama when OP loses her savings. But despite the sharp criticism, doubters started eating their socks by the following day when Alphabet announced that despite AI's influence, people were Googling more than ever. Reports of Google search's death were greatly exaggerated. Coupled with reports that Trump and the UK were about to ink a deal in which the UK would buy more American stakes, stocks went zooming. Just 24 hours after the reckless gambit, Sock Daddy cashed out a 13% gain of $268,000. Momentum was on his side, but there was more to be done. Mama needed more cheddar. And more cheddar arrived on May 14th. After lagging for a month, Alphabet finally started making a move to catch up with the broader market, and the stock rose to $165 in a sharp rally. Lil Sock's position was now up $284,000 in unrealized gains, plus his $268,000 in realized gains, putting him up well over $500,000. By market close, he cashed out some more as Google continued marching the post-liberation rally. When the closing bell rang, he was completely out of his $155 strike calls and continued riding the 150s like a boss. $860K was his. The comments went wild in his honor, for these gains were the work of a calculated master, and the trade's success meant an old woman could rest easy. But still, the job was not done. Several days ticked by. People continued to search Google as much as ever, as the Google AI overview thing finally started to catch on. People even started using Google to fact-check ChatGPT. It was all becoming clear. Google would indeed thrive in the age of AI. As Alphabet rode higher, Solid stock finally punched the meal ticket when SPY hit $172, a full $22 in the money versus his strike. His gains crossed the $1 million mark. And now, armed with $3.1 million, Big Mama Saka would live luxuriously, secure in her own San Francisco Bay home, relieved of her pending modest lifestyle. In 2 weeks, they had printed $1 million. That's $100,000 per trading day. As the sun set over the Pacific, Mama and her boy clinked glasses and finally bought themselves some softer socks. Congratulations on the extra beer money. And now, let's do the sponsored segment so I can get paid. Have you ever wanted to be a landlord and earn money by doing nothing, but you don't have enough money to buy a rental yourself? Or perhaps you're worried that tenants will trash the place, leaving you with holes in the drywall from when a 21-year-old man had a meltdown? Well, do I have a solution for you? Through ARC7, you can buy and own shares of individual properties and receive rent payments as dividends. I've been an ARC7 user as part of the Freeloader Challenge, and I've been a shareholder of a house in Alexandria, Virginia, receiving dividend payments monthly. Through ARC7, you've got a backdoor into being both a landlord and a private shareholder, and you can pick up shares for as low as $20. But Mikey, why not just buy shares of an REIT? Because you'd miss out on the dividend day bonus and new user bonus. New users get $50 back on a $1,000 investment, or $150 on a $3,000 investment, so 5% off the bat. Dividend day investment bonuses on the 3rd of each month offer as much as a 10% bonus, as an $80 bonus on an $800 deposit. Coupled with an average annual dividend of 4.42%, these bonuses go a long way. And if you do want to ditch your shares of these privately traded companies, you can always trade in the secondary market. While I wait for a crack house to open up in my desired neighborhood for the Freeloader Challenge, I'll be adding positions in ARC7 in order to diversify my slumlordship. Hop on with my link in the description to join in on the action. Everybody get that bread. And now, let's check out Dank Trade number 2. Next round in the chamber is a 25-year-old Amazon seller or dropshipper who is extremely interested in the Ukraine-Russia war and appears to believe everything is Russian propaganda. With username PleasantSwim9921, he prefers to be known as Libertarians for Ukraine. In fact, he appears to have joined Reddit in April 2024 just to talk about Russia and Ukraine. Aside from his war hobbies, since approximately age 19, the swimmer appears to have been running some unspecified e-commerce business that may have included flipping collectibles and wisely invested in diversified stock positions, amassing approximately $120,000 in investments over this time frame. This is a solid amount of money at 24, especially for one who presumably carries no debt. Later posts would show that our man's portfolio volatility was moderately high, indicating he likely held both boomer ETFs and more aggressive share positions suitable for younger folk. His goal was to invest consistently until he receives $100,000 per year in dividends, which would generally require at least $2 million. Despite his solid saving and investing, his pace of gains left many years ahead in the workforce, hoping that e-commerce doesn't get punked by AI, 3D printing, tariffs, or consumers just buying less junk online. In between incessant arguments about Ukraine and Russia, Swimmer appears to have begun discussing stocks and option trading in March 2025 as the bear market started kicking in full force. Over the course of the month, stocks took the kind of beating that had parents texting their kids for investment advice. But where the average trader saw nothing but unrelenting devastation, our man saw opportunity. Just as things looked hopeless for Ukraine, creative means of warfare allowed them to hold the line and even counterattack against a much more powerful opponent. Pleasant Swim now sought to summon the same strategy, and likewise turned the overwhelming red tide in the market to his favor. On April 2nd, speculation about Trump's Liberation Day speech scheduled later that day had everyone on edge. Importers were scared, exporters were scared, J-POW was scared. The potential for disruption sent stocks tumbling. Blood was inundating the streets, and according to Papa Warren Buffett, the buffet, blood in the streets means time to buy. Our man Swimmer dove deep into market analysis in an hours-long binge fueled by pork rinds and Bang energy drinks, and quickly determined that the all-American Chinese sweatshop hybrid company Nike, ticker NKE, had been adequately shafted already. Tariffs threatened to spank the company heavy-handedly, driving prices of shoes higher, which would cost either profit margins or consumer demand, possibly both. And to top it all off, Facebook people started talking about child labor again. It couldn't get much worse, and therefore, bad news was already priced in. The prospects for Air Jordans were grim, and the stock was down 20% from its high just weeks prior. All this before there was any actual action against the company. Further, Swimmer claims to have been persuaded by unspecified DD, which claimed that Nike had already been making plans to circumvent tariffs by returning production to the US. A 20% dip based on fear, pending plans to circumvent tariffs. The writing was on the wall. It was time to go all in on Nike before the pendulum swung back. In one fell swoop, Pleasant Swim closed out all of his old school diversified positions and put his dividend plans on hold. For if he could mint a fat stack on Nike, he'd massively accelerate his portfolio growth. In the moments leading up to the Liberation Day presentation, the contrarian investor dumped his entire $120,000 balance on deep out-of-the-money Nike calls expiring that Friday. He anticipated that Liberation Day would be a nothing burger, and Nike would take off to the skies once again when investors realized their fears were overblown. Initially, as the speech began, it appeared he'd get his wish. Mango's initial statements about general trade fairness reassured markets that this would all be political theater. Swimmer's Nike calls shot up in value. He does not share the exact amount of gain, but it appears that for at least a few minutes, he was up at least a few tens of thousands, potentially much more, as volatility spiked the prices of out-of-the-money options. But all that went to shit moments later when Big Don whipped out the board. With Nike making most of its shoes in sweatshops in China and Vietnam, the company was about to get donkey punched by 67% and 90% tariffs respectively. That was Nike's profit, straight from the company's coffers into the US Treasury, and shareholders would get railed. Bulls fought back hard, but out-of-the-money call premium melted down with prejudice. The longer Donnie talked, the more bearish investors became as they realized Liberation Day tariffs would be no joke. Money that took the swimmer 5 years to save and invest was gone in the span of an hour. His deep out-of-the-money calls quickly became worthless. $120,000 of his own earnings, plus whatever gains he had earlier in the trade, were dissolved into nothing but gravel and mud worth $12,000. A 90% loss in less time than it takes to cook crab rangoon. Our man took the L, devastated, humiliated, and reportedly bankrupt, although this is almost assuredly hyperbole. In keeping with his Russophobia, he also now believes that the DD regarding Nike production in the US was in fact Russian disinformation designed to deceive American stock traders. WallStreetBets commenters were gobsmacked by his befuddling trade. What fool would buy Nike calls on the exact day when Mango was due to fist global trade? Conversely, some mocked him for his cowardice in selling, calling him a paper-handed bitch when he still had $12,000 left to lose and 2 days before expiration. But any prospect of recovery before expiration was shattered when the stock gapped down $10 the following day. By then, Swimmer had already exited, preserving that remaining 10%, mashallah. Over the following days, things got worse for the market, however briefly, until the tariffs were paused at the behest of Lutnick and Besant. Swimmer was long out of volatile stocks. With nothing but the corpse of his former portfolio, he resolved to revert to his old plan of cautious, long-term investing. After losing 90%, he turned to VOO and SCHD, looking for 1,000 shares of the latter by the year's end, which would cost him about $26,000, about a fifth of what he had before he lit it all on fire. Today, the demolished trader is a broken man, seeking to piece himself back together on our bogleheads and dividend stock boards. But he is still young. This lesson could still be worth its price. I retain hope, however fragile, that this is a $120,000 lesson well received, and that Swimmer will one day get his portfolio back in order. Welcome to the casino, comrade, and now it is my honor to present the Dankest Trader of Wet Season, taking the crown as a big fan of bodybuilding and drone photography by the uncomfortable name of MoistAd9060, aka Average Redditor. Joining Reddit about a year ago in May 2024, the young chap tuned in immediately to the Jay Cutler subreddit to pay homage to one of the early bodybuilding goats. But despite any efforts he made in the gym, MoistAd never achieved those bodybuilding pipes in his forearms. His body remained modestly frail, unable to compete with proper bodybuilders. His hobby of living in his van to film nature conflicted with his desire to hit the gym consistently, resulting in no gains. But as Antonio Banderas says, "Cuando la vida es difícil, se abre una nueva tortilla." Or in English, when life has you down, make lemonade. It was time to flip his game. Moist Ad put down the barbell between sets of deep form squats and downloaded the one app that could turn any man into a monster with just the tap of his finger, Robinhood. If he wouldn't get big in the gym, at least his portfolio could get big on his behalf. Although he had a soy portfolio of about $15,000 in assorted indexed ETFs, it was time to make a change to his boomer investment strategy. Assessing market conditions in early January 2025, our man determined that quantum computing stocks were overblown. Every stock with a Q in its name was up hundreds of % in barely a month. Investors were thinking that AI and quantum computers together would join forces to dominate the tech industry. But our gym bro was not convinced. All these devices did was enable advanced physics experiments. The average person simply does not need to calculate the probability of an electron being in a particular cloud with femtosecond precision. In 30 years, this might change, but retail investors certainly were not going to wait around for someone to figure out what to do with this technology. The hype would surely die, and Moist Ad decided to make bank on the hype decay. With the less than $600 cash he could muster on January 6th, our man full ported into deep out-of-the-money puts on Ionic, ticker IONQ, expiring in 5 weeks. With a strike at $35 versus a stock price over $50, Ionic wouldn't need to just drop, but completely shit itself for our homie to make a profit. With the Quantum Initiative conference kicking off in France that day, industry geeks were tuned in. But it very quickly became apparent that proper quantum computing was a long way away, and the nerds in the industry used math equations with no numbers, making this unpalatable to the common investor. It's not clear if the conference had a real effect on the quantum computing trading community, but it's perhaps not a coincidence that quantum stocks started melting down as soon as the conference began. Within just 2 days, our man was up over 500%, and his $600 position ballooned to $3,440, a fine start. Proof of concept was complete. It was time to liquidate that $15,000 of boomer investments and kick off a new chapter. Over many months, his Reddit activity shifted from fitness and outdoorsmanship toward degenerate stock trading on WallStreetBets specifically, with fewer and fewer non-WallStreetBets posts. He traded exploration of the world for exploration of stunk. The underground welcomed him to our degenerate sub with open arms, and his dive into the abyss bore fruit. In a series of bearish plays between February and April, Moist Ad printed band after band as the 2025 bear market took root. By Wednesday, April 2nd, our man was fully gay bear, with an $82,500 portfolio fully invested in SPY puts expiring that Friday. Everything was on the line. But with President Mango Salsa poised to present so-called Liberation Day tariffs that afternoon, our man knew there was no way to lose. As the afternoon kicked off, Papa Cheeto hopped up on stage with the now infamous table that introduced a salvo of massive tariffs against every country on Earth, even those with no human population. The US was dropping bombs across the globe. No country was spared, and the lowest possible tariff was 10%. The market was horrified, and stocks started tanking. Overnight, it got worse, as journalist James Kalashnikov accused Trump's staff of using ChatGPT to create a silly formula that had no basis in reality. White House press homeboy Kush Desai tried to muddy the waters by presenting jargon that essentially reiterated everything Kalashnikov said, but with added gibberish. The market was devastated. Such an important task of determining tariff rates boiled down to things like 4 times 1/4 equals 1. Liberation Day was a disaster, and Moist Ad's puts started printing. Over the next several days, the market dropped harder than Daquan's next mixtape. Our homie's portfolio skyrocketed to $353,000. With his van living lifestyle, this was truly life-changing money. He could sustain his journey indefinitely, taking drone photos from Indochina to the cliffs of Moher, and enjoying the open road across the US of A, unburdened by the tribulations of finance. But Moist Ad was no quitter. He set his eyes on $1 million. It was game on. Our man doubled down, taking on more bearish positions, ready to see even further meltdown. And then, Trump said never mind. Flanked by an entourage of simps, the Big Cheeto said that Liberation Day tariffs were paused for 90 days to facilitate trade negotiation. Liberation Day was reverse liberated. Stocks shot up in the biggest day of gains in over 20 years. The trade war was over just days after it started. The bulls rejoiced in the streets with their capitalist concubines, while the bears skulked back into the shadows. Moist Homie's position was shafted, spanked down more than 57% from 353K to 150K. But he used a cool trick of zooming out to make it look like he was still printing. If only his psychological trick worked on himself. Flipping his game to a more pragmatic approach, our man went from purely bearish to trading calls and puts on both TQQQ and SQQQ, opening a barrage of long strangles on triple leveraged tech ETFs at various strikes. This is one of the least efficient strategies ever, as he now needed the market to move an order of magnitude more than volatility would imply, enough to compensate for the losses on the losing side. In simpler terms, this trade was regarded. Redditors mocked him for making such a foolish trade, but those who dunked on him thinking he'd be discouraged from trading poorly wasted their breath. Moist Ad was nowhere near finished. By April 15th, our man's long strangles on triple leveraged tech ETFs took their toll, and 150,000 was now 79,000. Clearly, the more complex options were a joke, and it was time to go bear mode once again. Announcing that his road to $1 million had merely hit a speed bump and that he'd 15x his portfolio in short order, Moist Ad revealed a flurry of SPY puts at various out-of-the-money strikes, with some weirdly placed out-of-the-money calls as a hedge. Soon after, he was trading specifically $10,000 of 0 day to expiration puts every single day with all gas, no brakes, and almost every day, the bulls trampled him. At one point, as the market dipped mildly, he regained some of the lost ground, reaching a respectable 123,000 once again. He could cash out and salvage something, but there would be no such trade. As the days ticked by, the market continued to take vengeance against him. The ex-Liberation Day rally was unrelenting, and by May 9th, he was demolished. His portfolio suffered a horrifying wrecking ball, knocking him down to below 15K. His ego had cost him his bags. He had the ticket, but the desire to become a legend outweighed his desire to actually make money. Ego, the old killer of many a degen, had claimed its next victim. In a wholehearted message, Moist Ad recounted his journey and admitted his self-deception. He revealed that he was so confident in his trading after a few months of gains that he planned to start a hedge fund. But in short order, he was humbled, both financially and spiritually. His final warning to others was that they should not follow his road down into the abyss of self-deceit. Bravely dropping his name, he signs off, Tyler. My man Tyler, your journey up and down through the tribulations of Liberation Day is an adventure that must be remembered forever. Let no man doubt that in suffering your losses, you have earned your respect through your self-reflection and warning to others. But although your reflections are admirable, you still cooked yourself, and for that, I offer you the crown of regards.
Who wants to be king?
Thanks for watching, everyone. Come hang out in our free Discord, and don't forget to drop me a like so I can prioritize more Dank Trades videos. I'll see you next time.